I am Peeter Rebane, the director of Firebirds. Well, actually, the co-writer, co-producer, and director in many hats in this project. And Firebird is a forbidden love story set in the 1970s Soviet-occupied Estonia, when a young conscript, a young soldier, falls in love with a fighter pilot, and their story through the years leading up to the Afghan war.
I'm so glad we can finally chat about this. I watched the movie a little bit ago, but I loved it. I cried. It it ruined me for a little bit. So I'm excited we get to chat about it.
And it's a really personal project that's captivated me for years, and my first directing debut.
I've spoken before about how much you felt this story, and that's why you were drawn to it. You had some parallels in your life similar to it. So could you just go into a little bit about that, and then also, just how you went about the process of finding the story and then turning it into a movie?
The story actually found me at the Berlinale Film Festival many years ago, over 10 years ago, I guess, where a film critic was showing around the original autobiography of Sergei. And a friend of mine, who's the founder of the Dark Nights Film Festival, she passed it on knowing that I was looking for material. And I read it over a weekend, literally cried, and just felt that I had to turn this into a film. But it was such a touching, simple human love story between two people, and at the same time almost fanatical, because we've seen quite many queer love stories, thank God, already on screen, but I'd never ever seen a story from the other side of the Iron Curtain in the 1970s and 80s. And at first I almost didn't believe it. I was thinking, this is like fantastical, that maybe it's just somebody's dream. And I started researching together with Tom when we became co-writers, and met other men who had served in the Soviet military at the time and who had different but at the same time similar love stories of falling in love with other conscripts or other officers, and realized that there was this whole subculture which existed, and people have fallen in love even during the most difficult of times, always.
So it has such a powerful message, like you said, and just showing people that these stories exist. Has anyone reached out since the movie has been out and kind of told you their story and how they relate to it yet?
Many, many hundreds of stories. It's amazing. We get literally hundreds of messages on our social media accounts, sometimes daily, and people from all around the world, Arab countries. One message which I really, really recall, and many of them from anonymous accounts, because people are afraid to say anything about their life publicly in those countries where it's still a death penalty for being part of the LGBTIQ community. And one message, for example, was that, "Thank you, your film was like a warm hug to me, telling me it's okay to be myself." And just like really, really heartbreaking messages. And also people who have served in the military. I mean, one actually ex-Soviet fighter pilot contacted us saying, I was in a relationship in the army. At almost all of our festival screenings in the US, which we did many last year, there'd be somebody coming up from the audience later introducing themselves as a retired Navy officer or Air Force officer, and telling the story of how they actually related to the scene of Raman gathering things, without spoiling it for the viewers, but saying how they had to similarly hide and gather things while serving in the US Army, because, there was a policy of being discharged dishonorably if anybody found out. So it's and maybe even the most surprising feedback has been from straight women. I've been fascinated actually at how many a lot of, let's say, middle-aged and older women have come after the screening saying how the film touched them and reminded them of how their husband cheated them with another woman, which is an interesting universality to Louisa's point of view. So it's been pretty wild.
Yeah, that's amazing that there's so many different ways people are taking it in and accepting it, and that it can just reach so many different people with their own backgrounds. When you were filming it, I know that it was a long time coming. It was a process. I know it took a while. Then you found Tom, and I know that the funding also took time to gather. So how did it feel when you were finally on the set and preparing the movie from the beginning, going into that moment?
Yeah, you're right that it was a long process before you asked, but then I got weird off that initially I was actually introduced to Tom already in December 2014, and we shot the first 2 scenes of the film in 2015 summer. And then Tom started making some suggestions of how to improve my masterpiece of a script, and which led to us co-writing for over 2 years. And then we raised financing, we did casting, we were looking, I think 2,500 self-tapes and many, many auditions for months. But after all of that, when we arrived on set, I think it's always one of the most magical times, because you've prepared all these years and suddenly you are there with people and everybody giving their interpretation of the character and circumstances, kind of opening up new storytelling. So as the first feature, it's been a learning exercise almost for me to understand how you write the film once. You write it almost second time when you shoot it, and then you rewrite it again when you edit it. It's literally, it evolves, the story evolves, and you discover new things. And you have like the scene, for example, of the dancing trees in the film, where like Sergei is observing some trees, and that and some other, for me, like really close to heart scenes all came out of just spontaneous idea on the set, that you are there and notice something and we improvise and shoot it. So it's amazing to be working with a team that everybody adds to your story. So.
For you, so you won't forget me. We could get the training plane and fly to Sweden. Sweden? Why Sweden?
I don't know. I don't care. As long as we're together.
Sergei, I'm an officer. I can't leave my motherland.
And I know you also got to meet Sergei, who wrote the book, and it is his story before his passing. So I wanted to ask just about that conversation that you had, and then also, deciding what moments of his life that you wanted to capture and bring to life.
Well, I think for any writer, director, and also Tom as the lead actor playing Sergei, it's an honor and it's humbling to meet the person whose life you're making a film about. And I think for me, the biggest lesson from him was how he asked us to make the film about love, not politics, even though the film comes out at the even most political possible era with the new Russian aggression in Ukraine, but how he had retained this quality of love and empathy and joy despite all the suffering in his life. And And that was I think the most inspiring bit. But then obviously as screenwriters and as a director, it was amazing to be able to ask, like, what kind of music would you listen to, and what kind of food would you eat, and to learn about the daily little details which you rarely, let's say, otherwise would get the full information from an autobiography. But probably the tough bit, to answer the last bit of your question, was changing some things. And I feel the biggest change we actually made was Luisa's character, because in the book, she's portrayed almost like a formidable alcoholic at the end, a rather negative character, like the obstacle to their love. But we felt that was maybe a bit doing injustice to her, that in reality, Sergei might have seen her as a obstacle to blame, but in reality, she was equally a tragic victim of the system, of this political system, and she didn't willingly choose such a future and such a life.
Absolutely. And I love how all of their stories come together and intertwine in the movie, and you really see the passion and emotion from all of them. My last question I wanted to ask was just creating this movie and being where you are now, like, how has it changed you, or if it has changed you?
Well, first of all, I think it was an amazing collaboration. It's the first time that I truly have created something together with another person, being Tom Prior, the lead actor and co-writer, and really bringing each other's strengths, and that sometimes, arguing, but often really adding on top of each other's perspective on the story, which I think really made it much stronger than me alone. As a director, I think the biggest learning for me is to trust my feeling and to not listen to rational arguments, the mind speaking. I think a lot of times it's easy to analyze things logically, but I found that every time when I would kind of take a decision based on logic rather than feeling, I would have to go back and correct it, and really learning to trust that sometimes it's just on the set as a director. It's important to say, sorry, I'm not feeling it. Let's try it another way, because I think as a director, for me at least, the most important thing really is finding the truth of the moment. I personally don't like to watch films which are full of predictable acting. When there's a sad moment, people cry, and when there's something else, I love unpredictability, I guess, in the moment. So, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really did feel like that in the movie when I was watching. Sometimes things, obviously it is based on a true story, but weren't going how you expect. And I did love the risks that I felt that it took with intimate scenes, really showing those on the screen and not pulling away, and things like that we don't get to see as much in TV still today. So I think it's amazing how you put it together.
The intimate scenes is again a good example that this was choreographed together with the actors. So it's really like when we wrote it with Tom, one of our key objectives was that it wouldn't become pornographic, but at the same time that we don't shy away, that it's about two people connecting, two souls connecting, that it's not, I think if you just go into graphic sex and you can go into very stereotypical, it just, for me, it becomes boring, like watching films. I love films which almost like 19th, 18th century French art, don't reveal everything, but are intimate at the same time.
Yes, I love that. Was there anything else that you wanted to share about this before we wrap?
The main thing which has really surprised me is how people still haven't returned to cinemas. mean, we had an amazing 140 screen release, and also what surprises me, how much I got, let's say, messages from people who watched the film online before it was available on VOD services. So my kind of main really wish is that if somebody, let's say, who didn't get to cinema or who maybe watched the film on some random site, if you love the film, please go and buy or rent it for your collection, because if you give back, then we can make more films like this. It's available on all digital platforms.